Computer. All right, cool. Thank you for that, everybody. And then next we have announcements. I believe that is David. If you have any trainings coming up, or Jerry, either one y'all know of. I know we have a little bit of a smaller period coming in. I wasn't sure if we had any more.
Yeah, so I don't have dates set yet, but I saw that they were going to have those hearings in Eastern Idaho at the end of May. It looked like they were going to be a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What I was going to do is I was going to touch bases over in Eastern Idaho, maybe Twin Falls area, and see if I could coordinate trainings with that so that I could I definitely plan on attending those ones over there. And that way I can, just to be in light of being efficient and money wise, try to coordinate some training into that same week. I just completed, I got back last night. I did 3 days of training, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I did Monday and Tuesday in Coeur d'Alene, or we use Post Falls facility there. First day I had 26 participants. Second day I had 29. And then in Moscow that I did yesterday, I had 10 participants there. So, uh, overall, that's to me is a pretty good turnout. So good training, good weather. Um, Everything went great.
So I'm glad to hear it. Once you have those upcoming dates, if you could send those to me so that I can put them either in the next newsletter or in kind of our debrief after this, that would be great. And if you need my email, let me know and I can put that in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. If you could send your email in the chat, that would be great. And yeah, I spoke with Tess last week, and we'll also be getting those sent over to Idaho as well, so Idaho could get those out. Also, too, I'll be sure wherever chapter I'm in, that chapter can get those flyers out as well too. So we'll coordinate as best we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, my email is in the chat. I always have to double check. I spell my last name wrong sometimes, which you think I wouldn't do, but it's long and that's my excuse.
And then I'll be coordinating with Jerry.
Awesome. All
Hey,
right.
oh, Dave, 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 can you hear me? It's Todd.
Looks
I think
like,
he dropped from the call. Maybe
yeah,
Oh,
he's getting reconnected.
I'm sorry, it looks like I lost you guys for a moment.
Dave, this is Todd. I was curious. You did training for the Idaho Power Field folks a couple, 3, 4 weeks ago. I'm pretty sure you did. How did that go? I was curious how they responded, if they had any comments from the field that they're seeing.
Yeah, I would say it was 3 or 4 weeks ago I did that training. It was always a great response. Anytime I work, um, Dave, right? Yeah, Dave. What's his name? Oh,
Thornton. Yeah,
yeah,
Dave
yeah,
Thornton.
Dave Thornton. Always have a fantastic response with the energy advisors. Um, Overall, yes, I think that I've received several calls from the energy advisors since that training we had. Most typically, and you'll like this, it was heat pump questions, set points, issues with heat pumps. So, walking them through that. As you know, sometimes it gets pretty difficult when you don't have load calcs for the residents, but work them through that. Um, and then as well, there were some tools that they're looking at. Like I told them, FLIR cameras are just almost invaluable when you're doing assessments on homes. So um, I've been working with them on, sounds like they're going to be purchasing some FLIR cameras for their energy advisors. So just sending them some links over to some equipment that I would recommend for them that's, inexpensive and great. But yeah, it's always I love training the energy advisors. They're always very, very interested in what I have to say. So it's always great.
I appreciate that. That's good feedback. Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
And good to see you, Gregory. Appreciate you being here. And with that, unless I'm missing something else on the announcements, we can go ahead and move to our building code board debrief with adoption strategy, and that'll be Jerry and Tess talking about that.
Do you want to lead that, Tess? You want me to go ahead and then?
I'll just kind of provide a little bit of context here. So I was able to attend the board meeting last week in Boise, which was great. Lightly attended, but we got some more information on the expected timeline and sort of next steps that DOPL and the building code board will be moving through. So Jerry, I'll kind of let you get into the details on that, but overall we had a good conversation with Justin Touchstone there at DOPL and got some good understanding of sort of some of the questions he's receiving and how he's planning on moving forward. So it was good chat with him.
Okay. So I was on the agenda and allowed to do the full presentation. This is the one that I think we put in front of the group in last winter. There was some discussion on, the red outlines and stuff. I took all of that out and basically highlighted the significant changes. Didn't really dig into the weeds on it. Also gave me an opportunity to introduce Nia and Tess. We talked about the field study. We also talked briefly about the integrated design lab, kind of letting the board know the resources that they have available to them. It was lightly attended. I don't think there wasn't very many questions on it. But then we had an opportunity to talk with Justin after the meeting to try to get some timelines in front of us. And so one of the, I guess what they're using for their around the state, Dave, anybody that's attending those meetings, what they're going to be sharing, and I don't know whether it will be part of the presentation or just made available, is they're going to use the significant changes document that I believe Lance sent that out to everybody in the collaborative. The kind of the NAHB's version of the significant changes, which was very similar to mine. It had a few additional items in it, but the format was more condensed. So I think that's what they're putting out there, because we are at that point in time where we really need to have a plan, and I'm hoping to start that development of that today in the material we're going over. So they will continue to use that significant changes, and what they're doing around the state is they're not developing a specific thing. They're just saying this is what the changes are and gathering public comment on that. What they're asking for is much more specific. And so we have a few options. Before I go into the options, there is a process that IDOPL has to go through before we can go into the rulemaking, and it's called a notice of intent. And so that has to be approved by legislative services, downtown, whatever you call that collective group. And so they are hoping to meet with them. Damon and I are trying to get this stuff together by next week and get it down to them by the first of the month and say, here is kind of what we would like to see, and not only what we're proposing, but the reasoning behind it. So one of the first questions that came up at the last time they went downtown was, who is pushing it? Who is advocating for it? and why. And so, we just said, well, we're still trying to work through that process. So just an overview, and again, I'm not trying to force a decision on anybody, but here's some of our options. One is, we push for the 2024 code for both commercial and residential, either the full version or the amended version. The second option, and I will show you in statute and rule how all of this looks and can play out. So we've looked at all of this to make sure these were all viable. There is a possibility of looking at the 2024 commercial and leaving the residential on the 18th. We've never done that before, but the way our statute and rules are currently listed and approved, that is an option. And I'm going to have today, I'm going to go through the residential a little bit, and Damon is going to cover the commercial. The last option, or not the last, but another option would be that we amend the 2018. And the feedback that we're getting from the collaborative and from the different groups that participate in our collaborative is we believe there's significant support for the 2024 commercial, and the 2024 residential is not so much support. I don't want to go into a lot of detail on that. I just want to put that out there. And so this is what we're trying to do is put together something that we can give to Doppel and say, this is how we would like to proceed. They would present that downtown, and downtown would say, yes, you can go ahead and go forward with the negotiated rulemaking, or no, you don't have the support. Do something else, or don't do anything. And so we have no way of, knowing what that is, or it's too early to be trying to influence that decision. As everybody knows, there's a lot of stuff up in the air right now, especially related to regulation. So question, I know that everybody has a lot of questions on the options, and I want to provide a little more basis for that. And then we can go back and look at options after I kind of show everybody what the language is and looks like. But is there questions about the board or what the board is doing currently that I may be able to answer? Go ahead. Hold on. Yeah, presentation. Okay. So the other thing that's happening with Doppel, this isn't really all us, is they're being requested to do a similar approach to ZBR with the statutes. And so they wanted us to look at anything that pertains to us. And I'm trying to focus on the energy code. And so I know we have a lot of building officials on there, and Jason, other Idaho members. You'll want to take a look at this, at the statute. I have this file. I will send all of these. I combined all of these just to make the presentation easier, but I will email all of these files to Lance so that they're available. But the only thing in statute that pertains to the energy code is all on page 9. And there's 2 sections in there, and both of them are related to the restriction part of it that just says we can't go above and beyond.
Is it page 9?
Yeah. Okay. We can't go above and beyond what the state adopts. And so that's kind of what I highlighted, because that is the only part that references specifically the energy code. Yeah, let's go back to this page. We're just going to go in order. Okay. when I said page, and then I was referring to page.
Oh.
Good. And so next page. And so the next section is the IDAPA rules, if you'll scroll down to the bottom. And all of our IDAPA rules that were modified last year as part of the ZBR process, everything related to the energy code is on 3 pages, page 9, 10, and 11. And so the first one shows the line, page 9, yeah, right there. So if you look at that, it breaks the International Energy Code out specifically with the commercial provisions. And I think this would allow us to entertain maybe having these two on separate cycles without having to go back and change the statute. And so that's kind of why I highlighted that. All of the energy code requirements, there's only 5 exceptions on there, or 5 amendments. We reviewed all of these during the ZBR process. Most of these are in there for a very specific reason, and I've asked Doppel or kind of repeated to them that we are not removing any of those. Even if we move to a different code cycle, we'll have to look and make sure that the the chapter and section numbers and everything is appropriate. But our intent would be to leave those amendments in there as they are written, obviously with a different date. So halfway down the next page, we start into the residential, and you can see there that they are also specifically calling it out by date cycle. And most of what we're doing in residential is on the next 2 pages. There is another half a page that I didn't include in this particular document. It is specific to log homes. Everybody has been happy with the log home requirements, so we are not trying to move any of that at this point. So under the residential section, there's only one area that we are looking at making some changes to, and that's section E, and that's in reference to the blower door testing and air sealing, and I'll explain why in the next few slides. But that's the one piece of language that Damon and I are working on. It's an area I think that would be really beneficial. It would be super easy to justify, and could be done independently of supporting something else. I just think it's something that's really appropriate. And so before I get into what that particular amendment would look like, does anybody have questions on statutes or rules? Okay, next page. So I highlighted the top of this table. This is the existing one. If we look at the reference, it specifically calls out this table, and it says a visual inspection shall be considered acceptable in lieu of testing using the items listed in 402.411. And this is that table that it's referencing in the IDAPA rules. But as you scroll down through there, and you can just kind of scroll up and down through the whole page slowly, please. Everything that is in yellow is specific to air sealing. There's a lot of information on there about air barriers and insulation, but the stuff I've highlighted is specifically referencing air sealing. And I know that people are going to want to look at this closer, and we have time to do that. But I wanted to point out a few things on that particular table. If you look to the left of the yellow highlighted stuff, scroll back up to the top. You'll see that the items that are listed in pink, the reason I put those in pink was hopefully you can still read what's under it, but these are areas where we have a lot of questions or concerns or enforcement, and it's because of the way that it's worded. And again, I don't want to go too deep into this, but the second item down talks about.
Gregory does have a question.
Okay.
Gregory, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so wondering if we should add a requirement for thermal in lieu of air barrier testing, in addition to these visual inspections, should we have a thermal camera image be done at the end of the project, merely because a thermal camera will capture your spots where you're going to have leaking for air barriers, possibly because if you have a bunch of cold air or hot air going out of one area, you can sometimes catch that stuff. Is that worth considering, or is that too much? Do you think there'd be no appetite for doing that in lieu of, or?
The problem is we don't, if we do something like that, we have to define what happens if we see something. If we can't get back up there. I've done a ton of thermal imaging, so has Dave. We understand where the weak spots are at. But if we can address it through air sealing ahead of time, then we don't have to worry about it when the house is finished. And so I think it opens up another, it opens up a lot of what ifs. And so, I mean, I'm not going to say no, but it's not really what I'm trying to do right now. So let me run through this list real quick and then see if we need to revisit that.
Okay, and just to clarify, I wasn't saying in lieu of your list. I think your list is great. It was more about just like in addition to, like at the end, like when you finish everything. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah. One of the difficulties in thermal imaging, and I just want to throw this out there. I'm a HERS rater. I've been doing air sealing for decades, and I really understand all this. But when I built my own house, I tested everything with the thermal camera when we were done, not realizing that I didn't have the temperature differential that I needed in the attic. And I had a whole section of the house that they had to access through a different area to insulate, and they literally missed the whole section of the house. And we didn't catch it at the inspection. I figured it out after I moved in because I couldn't get that room to come up to temperature. Then I shot it at night and got a whole different result. So there's quite a bit of expertise involved in doing the imaging well, and definitely some considerations for temperature differential. So the second item down, and I'm not poking holes in this, I'm just showing people why the codes evolve. We put something in there, sounds like a good idea, and then we realize, that's probably not really what we meant, and then we change it in the next code cycle. So this helps with our, supporting the code and the reasoning for progressing the code. But do we, can we make the current situation better? So the thing that I'm referencing is the second item in pink, and that is the ceiling attic. And it says access openings, drop down stairs or knee wall doors to unconditioned spaces shall be sealed. And that language kind of defeats the whole purpose of having the access opening. What that language should say, and it does say in the 2024, is that those openings need to be gasketed. That makes way more sense. And so it's possible in putting in this visual air seal checklist, it's possible to grab those languages from the 2024 and put those into our existing and make the argument that this clarifies everything, makes it easier to understand. It's actually cheaper. I can make all of those arguments on all of these points. The next one down, like I said, I didn't want to go into this too detailed. The next one down is another really good example, and it says that knee walls shall be sealed. I totally agree. But from a builder's perspective, and I've been in a ton of attics, This is not easy, cheap, or sometimes even feasible. Sometimes we just cannot get into the backside of those without doing a ton of extra sheathing and construction stuff. And so you'll see in the other codes, I'll point it out, that the verbiage on that has also changed. And so what we're trying to do, and I'll let Damon talk a little bit about this too, is we're trying to figure out what is the simplest, easiest way to get the best we can that's not confusing, that's cost effective, that we know will give us good results. And so I'm going to kind of go to the next one. If you look up at the top of this table in the green, this table is specific to air barrier and insulation. It doesn't mention air sealing as part of this table. Scroll up to the next page. Go up to there. And so in the 2021, now they've changed the title and now it specifically says air sealing. And so, we can use this language when we develop this new table. But, again, the code is evolving and we're seeing that they're addressing this better. As you scroll down the page, there is new sections in there. But again, it's not super clear. And so if we look at the item in pink, it talks about rim joist. And it says, you can read it, but it says the junctions of the rim board to the sill and the rim board and the subfloor shall be air sealed. It kind of depends. If you're doing an open crawl space, then obviously you want to seal the floor, but if there are leaks above, not leaks, but in areas that are not sealed that aren't affecting the thermal envelope, then why are we doing it? It would not provide a benefit. It does take a lot of time. And so what if we said, that this language, again, it needs to be specific and so that they can read that and say, where do you want this sealed? And I'll show you in something that Damon is developing how we're going to address that. As we go on down, scroll down a little bit. The second item from the bottom talks about narrow cavities. This is not in our existing code, but I believe it's very important. This is something that needs to be sealed. And so this item, could be easily added to our visual checklist. The next item down is the garage separation. This is another one that makes sense, but it doesn't follow the way that we actually build houses. When we do the garage separation walls, typically they put bad insulation in and they put the sheetrock on both sides at the same time. And so we don't have an opportunity to seal that wall unless we bring the drywallers out at a separate time. Dave, I can talk about that in a second. I'm going to pick that up in knee walls. So I will come back to you.
Perfect. I didn't want to butt in and
get
off track.
So the narrow cavities makes a lot of sense. And basically it's anything that you can't get insulated, you're going to have to seal. The garage thing, we have to look at that. How does that have to happen? But as we are doing it now, the reason, some of these are in pink and the reason we're talking about is we are not currently doing this. And so, this again, we're in the 2021, but that would be difficult. Next page. The next one is recessed lighting. In the 18, it says that you have to seal basically the trim plate to the finished ceiling. That doesn't make any sense because the middle of the light is wide open. What we really need sealed is the can light itself. We need the housing sealed to the sheetrock because the can is already ICC rated and airtight. but we need to seal the gap between the sheetrock and the can. And so this is a huge leak. Dave and I both have picked these up before. But that's not, we don't want to seal the trim ring. We actually want to seal the fixture. So we can write the language to address that.
And I'll look real quick, Jerry. I'm sorry. I'll review, but I believe there's a specific requirement that addresses that exact thing you're talking about that's outside of the table in the energy code, where there's a section that specifically says you will seal the can to the air barrier.
So
but it is outside of the table.
I don't want to, if we make amendments, they need to be extremely brief. And so this air seal table that we're looking at, it would just list the top 10 or 12 items that we're trying to capture. It wouldn't provide the detail that you're talking about. And I don't want to remove this section. So we wouldn't be, removing these other, air barrier and installation details. We would just be adding to, if you're not going to blower door your test your house, the following items will be visually verified. Is basically how it looks. We list the items, okay? So we're not taking anything away. We're just saying, if you're not going to do the blower door test, this is how we're going to be looking at this.
Agreed. Sounds good, Jerry.
Okay. Slow down or scroll down, excuse me. This other one in pink, and again, I will make this available to everybody. I'll leave it color coded. This is one of those things where I read it and it's like, well, I kind of get it, but I don't. And if I don't really understand this, and I do this like all the time as for a living, I'm pretty sure that the guys in the field that are building these are going to look at that and go, I don't know what they mean. And so again, we're not trying to delete these tables, but this would not be an item on our quick checklist reference. Scroll down. So the next one, scroll up to the top just a second. Let me read the title. Are we still on the 21?
Yes.
Okay. So the next item down is the communications boxes and stuff. And I get all of this, but we can really simplify this language. And it's like anything that penetrates the outside air barrier must be sealed to the air barrier. We can rewrite that so people understand it. And we don't have to name individual items off. It should be anything that penetrates that needs to be, sealed. So there's easier ways to draft this, so that we can have the simplified checklist. Go down next one. Scroll back up for a second. A little more. The last one on there is one of those that, again, common walls, we get that. Yeah, anyway. So that was actually, the last one was the 2024. So the way I have it in the document is you'll see the 2018, then the 21, and then the 24. So if we don't, or we're unable to advance the 2024, it doesn't mean we can't borrow the language and amend it into what we're already doing. As long as we're not citing that specific code or that cycle, we can just take what the intent is and put that in the wording and say, these are the following areas have to be visually verified. We list them. So what that potentially could look like, and I'll let Damon go into this in more detail, but the next one is a table like this with illustrations. And I don't believe Damon and I don't know if Greg is on the call. I don't believe we can use illustrations in IDAPA rules. I'll have to check that. But the concept here is solid. We would definitely want to use illustrations and or pictures. And as part of presenting this and advocating for it, it would be super helpful to have a little guide that says, this is what we're referring to, just to kind of help people understand what the list is about. Again, one picture, maybe two, but just to kind of highlight what it is. And then after, if they decide to move forward with that, we can process that into something that's available online or, available to contractors and part of our training. So thanks for the formatting and stuff that you guys have done on this, Damon. And then my final slide, and then we'll go for some questions, is we have, let me see, picking appropriate. Oh, sorry. Okay. So this is the last of my slide, and then I've just got a couple of open-ended things that I wanted to talk about. This is some work that Owens Corning has done, and we've looked at this again with thermal imaging and actually Flo had tested some of this stuff. And this is showing, what the top, we call it the bang for the buck thing. And if you start at the top, you can see that, some of this stuff really, really matters. And then as you go to the bottom, some of it doesn't matter so much. And so if we're trying to do something super simplified, let's go for the big items. Let's go for the easy stuff we can not only understand, but stuff that's very easy for them to do in the field. And I've been doing this type of training for, 15 years, Dave? And we can show that, people are making the effort. They're just not doing it in the right places. And by simply just moving the material from one place to another, same amount of labor, same amount of material, you can get a much better result. So to kind of end the discussion on the air seal, I wanted to point out that of all of the modeling that we've done over time, air sealing is still the best option out there for energy efficiency, hands down, over any other single thing we can do on a building. To try to make that building efficient, it needs to be reasonably tight. And the payback is there. It's easy to find. It's easy to justify. But most importantly, and anybody that's doing this work or understands how structures come together, that this has to be done when the house is being built. If we don't do it now, we can't go back and do it later. And so it's critical that we do a better job with this. And one way to do a better job with it is just to simplify it and just say, stop doing this, do this instead, and you'll get much better results. I've done hundreds of homes. We have all of the data. I have my own field studies that we've been doing. I have utility data. I have actual case study. I can prove 100 ways to Sunday that this is a no-brainer. And I have no reservations about pitching this to the board, to the legislature, as something that makes a lot of sense for our climate. There is also a safety and health risk to this, because when we don't do this, we end up with a lot of problems. And that's been kind of the mainstay of my work, is making houses work again. And I know when we don't do this right, we end up with, a lot of structural damage. We end up with mold. We have houses where you can't reasonably heat and cool them. There is plenty of evidence there that would help me make a case for, making this one change. And I truly believe that we're looking at, Dave, I'll let you chime in on this, but we're thinking that we're leaving 20 to 30% of our energy savings potential on the table with the existing code. And this would go a long ways towards filling that gap. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I'll let Damon talk a little bit on the table. In addition to the air sealing, Dave, I don't know if we can ferret everything out on the knee walls, but there are 3 things that I'm actively working on that would be part of the energy code moving forward. No matter how we do it, whether we're amending the current or adding the new, there is 3 items that need to be addressed that cause a lot of lot of disagreement out in the field. A lot of the calls that Dave and I take, a lot of the times we go out there with problems, they fall into three categories. And that is the air seal being the number one thing. The attic ventilation is another huge factor, but more in the Treasure Valley, Twin Falls area, more in what we call the banana belt. They seem to have it figured out over in eastern Idaho and North Idaho, but we have a lot of trouble with it here and a lot of super expensive air conditioning rates that basically link back to improper ventilation. In addition to mold. So the air seal would be number one, attic ventilation is number two. And then the knee walls is one of those things where we've kind of had to just back off because we couldn't write. We didn't have the language and the code didn't address it. And so we kind of just leave it up to the local jurisdiction and let them do whatever they can do on it. The 6-sided enclosure is ideal. And that would always be my preference. But we have situations where we call them short knee walls, where they're built into the truss package. And they don't want to build another wall inside it. It doesn't make sense to build another wall in it. And in those situations, it would make more sense to use an air barrier on the attic side to make sure the insulation stays in place and not worry about trying to sheathe it or seal it. Yes, it's a weak spot in the house, but I've tried sealing these spaces and trying to get the contractors to frame all of that in and box it in. It's not cost effective, and it just creates a lot of consternation with the builders. In the 2024 package, they proposed amending the knee walls and separating them from the exterior wall and actually categorizing it as something independent. And they chose 5 feet. They said anything less than 5 feet is considered a shortened knee wall, and there's a different process for doing it. And so we could clarify the language on that. This is something the builders proposed. It makes sense to me, totally understand why. And we could definitely put together the illustration as to what that needs to look like. And my point being here, and I know this has come up before, I don't work for the builders. I don't get anything from the builders. I don't represent the builders, but I understand how to build a house. So does Dave. And they are not currently engaged. They're just looking at us and saying, what are you guys going to do? And I would love to be able to go back and say, you know what, here's some things that make sense to us that we think would be beneficial to you. How about you help us do something that makes sense for everybody while we're going through this process? And at least we get something that we can push through and actually get through. And so that's my reasoning behind those particular amendments. I know there's probably some other things. I'm trying to keep this simple and basic. I'm just trying to say, these are 3 things that really matter, that makes sense, that we can easily justify. They don't cost you anything, or the cost is minimal, and we can show that it makes a big difference. So I'm happy to entertain other things if you have them. But understand we're under the gun. We need to have this language drafted into Doppel by the end of next week. And so I'm available on the residential, and then Damon is available on the commercial.
What do you need from us, Jerry, to help you support this? Do you need, do you want to ask for help to help write some stuff, or are you?
Ideal.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Gregory. I'm horrible with names. You're with who?
Avista.
Avista. We obviously I'd like people to look at the draft language, but we're at one of those kind of juncture points where we need to give Doppel something and then just say, can you take this downtown, see if they'll bite, you know? I mean, that's really what we're trying to do. I've already been told that if we go down there with the full 21 or 24, it's a no. And so either we have to massively modify the 2024, they're not interested in 21. Then we end up expanding our IDAPA rules, which is contrary to the ZBR. And so what Damon and I and others have been talking about is can we amend our existing one with like no more than a page and a half addition to the total package and get some true savings and some meaning out of it, you know, where we don't run afoul of, you know, we're expanding the rules again.
I guess I was wondering, is there any areas that on either the residential or commercial where you would desire some help for us to take a look at and really, you know, focus it and give you actual words on a page that you could include? Or is there anything that would be helpful to you?
I'm not going to turn that down. Yes, thank you very much. I just don't know that we can do it, that I need anything this week. I don't. Damon's going to talk about commercial, but I don't need anything on the residential. I'm familiar with the rule writing process and stuff. Most of the amendments that are currently in there were Jason has helped with some of them. I've wrote other ones, and so we can get the rough draft in there. And again, this is not a final decision. It's just, you know, can you give us something, you know? Maybe they're open to, you know, looking at the 24. I don't know. But I want to have a couple of options to present them.
So Gregory, on the commercial side, I'd welcome, yeah, any feedback you have if you're dealing with any commercial projects that are looking at the 2024 code, any areas that might give them heartburn, or parts of the 2024 code that you know are really beneficial in terms of clarifying language. Any feedback you have from your constituents, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we deal with a lot of customers coming on. I mean, so I hear about all the pain points, and we work in Washington and Idaho. So, obviously, very different states with very different codes. But I hear the complaints on one side of the state line versus the other side of the state line, and you know, what I mean, so I hear both. Um, I mean, so as I'm gathering, just so I'm clear, is the direction to suggest the adoption of the 2024, or is it more suggesting just doing a modified what we currently have? Because I think I heard the later was being kind of the new direction, or did I misunderstand?
So that's the question that I'm putting in front of the collaborative today.
Because both are, I mean, having clarity on which path we're going to take would help on, I mean, I'm more than happy. I've written code proposals for other states outside Idaho and I'm more than happy to help. But I mean, trying to do it for two at once is kind of difficult. Like it'd be nice to choose a path and then work on that, as opposed to saying, well, we're going to write two different sets of code proposals for two different options. That's a lot more work.
These are not the true code proposal. That's kind of the difficulty in trying to explain this. Where the formal code proposal would come through the negotiated rulemaking process. We're not there yet. We have to get enough support from downtown that says, you know, yes, you can open negotiated rulemaking or no. And without that, if they tell Doppel that they're not going to entertain adopting a new code cycle and we don't have another option, that's it. We're done. We can try again next year. I would prefer to have another option on the table. And so that there would be, you know, one or the other, but the language that I'm talking about today would follow regardless. It would be part of our future amendments, regardless of code cycle, because I believe that this is the piece that we're missing.
Gregory, I think if one thing that would be helpful to at least be made aware of or see from your perspective, if you do have examples or kind of this list of provisions from the 2024 that folks are feeling strongly about either way, and you have in your region, whether you want to call it a benefit or not, but you have folks who are building across both states, and if there's examples of like, hey, this is really great, we love this from the 2024, it'd be great to have this in Idaho as well, or the opposite of that, that would be really helpful if you have a list like that you could send.
I could draft something up. I don't have anything readily available. I would clarify that I'm not aware of any builder that is saying we want this improvement, because that's more restriction. So a better way to frame it would be, it's more about this new requirement has a cost associated with it or a difficulty associated with it, and then if it ends up being a smaller cost or smaller difficulty, then you don't get the pushback. If it ends up being a massive cost or massive difficulty, then you get the big pushback. But I'm not aware of any builder who says, please give me more requirements.
Sure. But I think if there are other benefits, right? Consistency, clarifications that have been added in the 2024 code that weren't in 2018, things like that. I definitely, yeah, I hear you that that's not what builders are excited about, but
I could help identify some of the low-hanging fruit, or either low-hanging fruit of things that you're not likely to get much pushback on, and then also identify those things that are the more onerous aspects, and those are the items that we'd probably want to avoid, or we might have bigger contention and arguments over.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then, Jerry, maybe we don't get them all in, like you're saying, in this first draft next week, but some things we can work towards over this process.
Yeah, I like your approach, Jerry. I think we all know we could do better on air sealing, and it just makes it's like you said, it's minimal cost, a little bit more time for big effect down the road on the home. So I really like the approach. I love the visuals too in the checklist. How many times we see those words and people are like, what's that mean? And you can show them on the visuals. That's awesome. And I like this list ranking what you're sealing and what's the big bang for the buck on what you're sealing. This is a big deal. I can't tell you how many times we're like, will you do that top plate? Go seal that top plate. They're all worried about the sill plate, but look what makes the difference, right? It's like, it's crazy. I don't think people always know this stuff out there.
They don't, and we put it out in training forever, but it seems to have a different effect if it's a code requirement.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, we have something that we can make available to all of the jurisdictions and the contractors.
Yeah.
And you can hand it to them and say, here's what we're looking at. If you're doing a visual, here's what we're going to be looking at.
No, I think it's great. We could definitely do better in this area and make a big impact. I think as far as new codes, I don't know. It's getting late in the game. We're almost to May. It's going to be a miracle if 24 codes get done this year. But I still think the work needs to be done, and then maybe it can happen next year.
Yeah, I think the kind of what I was trying to put it in front of people as an option. The amending the existing is pretty straightforward. It's just a language change.
Yeah.
And if we put the 24 in front of them and they say no, it's probably going to be no next year.
Yeah.
Or we may just say, you know what, let's do something pretty easy that we can get some agreement on and leave the 24 open and see if the political climate changes a little bit. Now, that's just I have to go on my opinion at this point, Jason, but I appreciate
Yeah,
your
we're just
support.
getting hit with how can we reduce regulation? Building codes are a barrier to affordable housing. So there's all this other stuff going on out there right now.
And so my pitch on this would be that, at most it's cost neutral. It's just simply applying labor to a different area and being more specific. And to try to limit some of the debate that's going on in the field between the builders and the knee wall argument for,
Yeah.
to go.
Oh yeah, we know the knee wall one.
I do know Damon's presentation has some more of the air sealing graphics if we want to get to that so we can keep going.
So please, if you guys have something you're concerned about the wording, or there's something you think that I'm missing, please let me know next week. Like I said, I'm not writing the final rules, not trying to make, the deal. I'm just trying to give them something that they can take downtown. It's like, can we do this? Can we move forward with this? So, but we are on a short time frame. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks so much, Jerry. I guess one point of clarification. So if we're able to get the document you're sharing out by like end of day today or early tomorrow, Daniel, that'd be super great so that folks can respond to it. Back to the air sealing checklist. So Jerry, you've highlighted sections within both codes, I think, right? Would the final table, would the final result be a combination of all those things that are highlighted into a final air sealing checklist table?
So I didn't do a total count on the stuff that I highlighted. The goal is to keep it at 10, maybe 12 items that are very specific, so that it fits in, a nice small table. And so the items in pink are things that, kind of need to look at it and look at the language in it. What I want to do, I was kind of waiting to see if there was any feedback from today's meeting. I will get with Damon and IDL using their existing format, and we'll narrow it down to those 10 or 12 items and put it in that format. And then we'll make that available for review. And we'll work off of that.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
All right, so next we'll go ahead and Damon has a presentation for the commercial side of 24. And let me make sure that I'm assuming you need the ability to share your screen. So, yep, okay, cool.
All right. Yeah, so I'll just pick up on kind of where we were on the air sealing. These graphics, they're from a great resource from Energy Trust of Oregon. So we're not, developing these. We're just pulling from here. Which has just very clear visual guidelines. But Jerry, you said, maybe illustrations aren't allowed, and we were trying to fit it to one page. So that's why the graphics are so small and so hard to read. But maybe we could just keep the language here, and then have a separate document which has these has it at like a full scale for visual reference for inspectors.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're trying to kind of format it in the same font and table as what would go into the IDAPA rules. So here's kind of the rules Jerry was showing earlier, and just like how do we, if we did go to the 2024 edition, what might have to be changed in here? If there is no appetite for adding further restrictions to the code, but there is desire to say have that 2024 language on eave baffles or digital plan review, or the information on construction documents. Could what amendments would it take on the Idaho side to make the 2024 easier to comply with and about the same level as what we have right now, the 2018 code? So trying to kind of follow the same IDAPA language would be, maybe removing this heat recovery requirement for climate zone 6, or testing mechanical ventilation systems, or interior lighting controls, or that additional efficiency matrix. So, that's kind of the open question that we started exploring. Charlie gave a little bit of feedback in terms of the preference of, do we want to just adapt the 2018 residential code and move forward with a 2024 commercial code? Or do we want to move both forward to 24 so that the language and references are consistent, but maybe dial back some of the controversial provisions, controversial to builders for the residential side? I'd like to hear folks on here in the collaborative, if there's a direction that they feel strongly one way or the other. Charlie, you mentioned you like the consistency of 2024. Jerry, you mentioned, maybe it's better. You and Jason said we're already so late in terms of code adoption. Maybe we should, it's simpler from a language perspective or amendment perspective to just add in that air sealing table, but keep everything else the same. I don't know. Yeah, Jason, feel free to expand a bit on your thoughts. You've been on this board before, so.
Yeah, I mean, as a board member, I like seeing options presented, right? So it's great to have. I think you have a version of, hey, here's a 24 with amendments, or hey, here's a 2018 with the amendments you want, and say, what do you want to do, board? That's what that board needs, is just proposals with, common sense amendments and options. And that's really what they're there for, to decide on the options and vote for it.
Okay. Thanks. Others?
Well, no, wait, this doesn't really give you a direction per se, but I've already, since you had the residential up and you've already self-identified, lighting controls in a residential is something that people absolutely hate. They despise those. But in the same note, the energy efficiency of our LED light fixtures have improved quite a bit. And so it's not that big of a deal to get a higher performing light fixture. In residential, oftentimes there's socket bulbs that they sell. On the commercial side, I mean, they're buying your troffers and all, and all those. And to specify a higher efficiency for your lighting is not that big of a deal, which is noted. On the residential side, I mean, I'll suggest if you want, I mean, air sealing, I agree with Jerry. Air sealing is very important and a good way to get air sealing is the flash and bat method, where you just do some spray foam a couple inches. But I mean, a flash and bat is expensive, but it's a really good way of solving both your insulation and air sealing in one big swoop. So people might push back against it, but it's a really good way to accomplish it. Sometimes, continuous installation on the exterior of homes in residential, that actually makes a huge difference. But I've heard a lot of pushback on that. And it's not necessarily, when you break it down, it's not necessarily any more much effort or money wise, but it's something very different than what a lot of people are used to. And so you'll get your residential builders who are very used to one way of doing things, and so you might get pushback there, even though it makes a big energy efficiency difference. They can actually sell a house for more square footage, because you measure on the exterior of the walls, so you get more square footage. So there's a lot of if you sell it right and you did a training program, you might get buy off on that continuous installation. But otherwise, I've heard builders complain left and right about the continuous installation in the code. So I don't know if that kind of a little highlight of a few little things that help. Oh, also for like continuous installation under a slab, if you're using in slab heating, that makes a huge energy efficiency a deal having insulation on the slab. If you're not using in slab heating for a basement, it still is helpful, but it doesn't move the needle as much because your heating source is not right there on the floor. So there's different things that I don't know if those are worth considering or.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks, Gregory. Yeah, so this is the current Idaho amendment, which is instead of having any continuous, you're still allowed R20. So, if we did move forward with the 2024 code, we would just keep this table probably as is, just updating it to the reference for the 2024 code rather than the 2018 code. But the table's the same, it's just a slightly different number.
So one other thing note on commercial side, so the U factors for your fenestration. So residential, there's not a lot of products out beyond, I mean, triple pane or some of your higher performance glass things aren't really available on the residential side. But on the commercial side, that's starting to be more prevalent. That is one of those things where I haven't costed it out. So, but that is one thing to worth investigating to see should a better U vector because that your best windows right now perform worse than your worst wall typically. So like you might get an R if you want to convert your U factors to R factors, you might be like an R4. Well, let's see, the reciprocal of 0.34 is what you have on one for an example. So 0.34 reciprocal, that's 2.9, an R 2.9. So you can see that's pretty bad. Like if your wall was R 2.9, you'd say, oh, that's horrible. Well, that's what we've done. We just put a window with an R 2.9 window in the wall. So there's a lot of room to improve that. There's a lot of products on the market that are getting way lower U factors. So basically, you can get equivalent to like an R14 window or even R21. That's I haven't costed it, so that's one thing to check on what the cost is. But that might be an opportunity.
So Gregory, I just want everybody on the call to understand that, nothing in our code prohibits anybody from going above and beyond. But what we're setting is the absolute minimum. So we're setting a floor, for the entire state, and that's the way that everybody looks at it. So just want to make sure people understand that this doesn't prevent somebody from doing it better or doing it different that ends up better. But we're setting the floor.
Yeah, and I was just highlighting areas that make a difference. So that way, and these might be items that you might get a pushback on, and maybe there are arguments we can say to kind of stop some of that pushback. And maybe some of this is things where we want to, so I was just kind of highlighting opportunities, not necessarily saying.
Yeah, thanks, Gregory. So in terms of parts of the commercial code where there's major changes going from the 2018 to the 2024, something that Dylan Agnes at our lab has been looking at is the lighting controls. And then he's also been discussing that with a few architects as well. So if we did, move forward with the 2024 commercial code, even leaving the residential code the same, some of the big changes are commercial lighting controls. There's also this envelope testing requirement And the where did I
The
losing my
matrix.
navigation? The additional efficiency options, this matrix, depending on the building occupancy and its climate zone, that might, in terms of like language and complexity, I love what it does in terms of trying to offer extra options for architects and kind of pushing towards what's most cost effective for a particular building type and climate. Um, but if there's concerns about its complexity or trying to simplify it, or making sure there's not additional regulations that the governor's office is concerned about, then maybe this would be, one section where we say we're moving forward with the 2024 code, so we have consistency in code language and code cycle generation, but we're pulling back on some of these additional options that we didn't have in 2018, like this energy efficiency matrix, or maybe we have a separate compliance pathway for commercial lighting where we say, you can also just install LLLCs as an alternative to the daylighting and occupancy controls. Dylan, you started to say something. Go ahead.
I was just mentioning, don't forget the matrix. That's probably the most convoluted, confusing addition.
Yeah.
C406, I would suggest that you might get better buy-in if you just subtracted that whole section, and as a starting point, that might be and that's just my interpretation of what the environment is in Idaho. On the residential side, that would be eliminating the R408, which is the additional energy credits there. But I have heard from folks in some builders that on the residential side, R406, the energy rating index compliance is an alternative. They like having that as an option. So that doesn't force them to use it, but keeping R406 would be just another option for them that a lot of them like.
Other feedback or comments? Jerry, did you have anything?
No, I'm good. One of the challenges in looking at the residential, again, comes back to, how heavily is it amended? How much does it add to the language? What you did there obviously fits within the space that we already have, but there may be some redirects on the exceptions. I'll have to verify that. My intent, Damon, was to get with you next week. We'll set up time, and I can come down and we can kind of clean up that air seal list, and at the same time put together the justification for it. So that's what I'm trying to do with you guys next week. If you could help with that,
that'd be great. Yeah.
And the question for the group is, and this is not a decision thing, it's more just something to ponder. If we take the 2024, the section 408, the additional energy efficiencies, is half or more, slightly more than half of what the potential energy savings for going to that code cycle is in section 408. So if we start trimming back, if we look at the cost and the potential savings of the things that we're going to exempt, is what we end up worth. What we would end up with is just some clarifications on administrative rules and definitions. We wouldn't end up with any significant energy savings. Right? I understand everybody wanting to be on the same code cycle, and so we have to ask, what is our goal as this group, or what is our expectation? Are we truly trying to save energy, in which case things like attic ventilation, air sealing make a lot of sense, or are we trying to move the code forward for efficiency and other reasons. And I understand one of the things that Damon and I didn't bring up today, and Jason, you might weigh in on this. Are we able to train our new guys on the 2018, or is that going to go away?
You can't test or certify on the 2018 any longer. So that is an issue. But I still think we'd be picking up efficiency in the code with these air sealing amendments. I think you're going to get more percentage of efficiency, don't you? It's going to enhance.
Yes. Yeah, but I'm saying if we didn't do the amendments, we didn't deal with the air sealing, and we just upgraded the code and then amended it, would we come out with, something measurable?
Yeah.
Efficiency-wise, that was kind of the question.
Yeah. But you're right, on the certification front, we're having the test on the 21 or 24 right now.
But also, if you scaled back or eliminated the energy credits, that still could be a win in the sense that you're setting yourself up that the next time you can act, or later on you can add that in, or so you're kind of more of a gradual approach to still set us up so we can get more energy efficiency as we go.
Gregory, have you looked at section 408 in the residential and what each of those things actually are asking for?
I've looked at various ones in there. Yeah, I've looked at quite a few. And so I'm not, and maybe this is a conversation we have with the, this is really like Doppel's, what they're wanting, their direction. I was just suggesting trying to get more buy-in to move forward as opposed to just stay stagnant. So if they have more appetite to bite off R408 and C406, awesome. If they don't have the appetite, then maybe we look at a scaled back version or we possibly forego. So I'm just trying to help us get traction and move forward whatever degree we can.
Todd or Sheree, do you guys have a?
Yeah, that's Todd. I was curious, as far as the landscape goes, the states began these public hearing meetings in April, or I think, and you did the 15th, and they're going to end on October 21st, I think. Are we the only voice out there with regard to the IECC? I didn't get to be in your meeting, Jerry, and I not attended the other ones across the state, but what's going on out there? Is any other entities speaking up on a preference?
The second leg of their around the state tour, I believe, is only in May. It wraps up in May. The meetings that they have scheduled for later in the fall will be more in response to what direction they decide to go in.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. I didn't realize that. And then the content presented in that April meeting, I want to make sure I understand the slides that you showed us previously in the last few months. What you first, put as red markings on the 2024, that content was provided publicly to the board. And then was this content we're talking about now, the air sealing details, was that discussed at that meeting or just the 24 with considerations?
I went back on the presentation that had the red stuff on it. I took all of that out. I didn't present anything that I didn't say this is controversial or a concern. I didn't present it that way. I presented it as significant changes.
Yeah, I got that. But the content we're talking about now, the option of taking the 18 and doctoring up the 18 as the proposal, is that an option that they asked us to do?
What I'm trying to do is give them something to work with when they go downtown. So nobody has seen this. We're hoping to have, a rough version of it next week. And I don't know that their meeting downtown would allow for them to go into a lot of detail. Probably not, because they're also dealing with the building codes, both the IRC and the IBC. And so it's going to be kind of a package thing that says this is what we're doing. The board or the board, their response to this is, well, we're not only authorized, but we're told by statute that we have to review these codes. And so they're just saying, we're reviewing these, and downtown is asking, who's pushing this, or who's trying to advance this. And so it's, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to approach. I mean, that's why we have our governmental processes. It wouldn't be out of the ordinary for somebody like me to say, hey, you guys, there's some things you could do that would make everything a lot better, and this is what you need to do. I don't have to belong to an organization to do that. If it makes sense and it saves people hassle, time, or money, then it's probably something that people would be interested in. And so I think, that there's an obligation there, and I don't think they have to say, this person is asking for this or this person's asking for that. It's just part of what we do. It's an ongoing, evolving process.
And then for the opportunity to present what we're talking about, I mean, to get on the docket before May, is that the venue we would need to do is get on their agenda in a meeting before May or the end of May?
If we
or talk to Justin directly. I mean, what?
Yeah, if they decide to move forward, and they're going to allow us to continue the review process, then yes, what we're doing today would be part of a future presentation.
10-4, okay. Yeah, because ultimately I'm just trying to figure out which option has the stigma. I mean, it seems to be we can accomplish good things either direction, but not to call it political, but this number 2424, is that something that in their minds that, I don't know. It's just like, is there a stigma that could prevent it from going forward? It's beyond what I get involved in, but it's.
I think to simplify the atmosphere is we're definitely on a less regulation projection.
Yeah, and that's why I say it, but I don't like to get in those conversations. I'm not privy to what's going on behind the curtain. But I mean, we do a lot of work, and I think we've got two options that have pretty cool results. I think either direction, but it's to me it's just like which one of these cars can go forward, which option. But thank you, appreciate it, Jerry.
We believe there's quite a bit of support for the commercial. The residential is, as you know, has always been tough.
Yeah, and that's the one I meant. Sorry. Yeah, commercial's a kind of a no-brainer, but yeah.
Chad from AIA, you unmuted? Did you have feedback?
Well, I really appreciate everybody's input and so on. I'm sorry I had something that came up, so during the presentations I wasn't able to follow everything. But from an architect standpoint, it would seem like I'm an advocate for insulation, right? This is one of the things that I tell all of my clients that, do everything you can from an energy standpoint, because that's going to be your best payback on a house. And especially I'm a residential architect. Most of my work is in the residential field personally, but the aspect of the code adoptions and so on, it would seem like keeping it to the basic code and trying to promote the adoption of the 2024 code across the board would be the best way to approach Idaho in the adoption of that code. And the reason for it is to continue to be current with national standards. And for years, we were way behind those national standards. And it wasn't until 4 or 5 years ago, Idaho stepped up and started to adopt the more current code. And so I would encourage the position of adopting the codes across the board. I know this is regarding energy codes, but AIA Idaho is wanting to take the position, I think, I'm not speaking for AIA Idaho, but to adopt all codes, right? We want to get to the 2024 code because that's where the national standard is. And so to take the energy part of that and try to keep it as it is would seem like the simplest way to be able to achieve that versus trying to create addendums or anything to it. That's
Well,
just one thought.
yeah. So I'm pretty aware of how the political process works. I spent 10 years down there. I don't mean to sound presumptuous, but I don't think from a legislative perspective, they have any interest
No, they don't.
in
And
meeting a
so,
national standard.
and they weren't interested in adopting the current codes in place until it was brought to their attention that they were starting to affect the ability of the state of Idaho to be insurable.
I realize that, but just to give you a brief history without going too deep into it, we never adopted the energy code. That was done as an executive order in order for us to receive the ARA funds. And the legislators never had a choice. They never had a decision in that. So the 2009 was adopted as a condition of accepting the ARA funding. It took us over 10 years to modify it to get it up to the 2018. So it was a hard thing to move. So just a little history there on that. And as AIA, if that is the direction that your organization wants to go in, I applaud you for that. What I'm trying to say is that they are asking at this point, one, will they even entertain it? And that's what we're trying to figure out. Will they even give us the airtime to go any direction? And if they do, then we have to say, okay, this is the direction that we're going to go in. There's nothing that would prevent AIA from, coming together as an organization and presenting to the board and saying, this is what we would like to do. We don't, if we don't, that's what puts me in difficult position is, and that's why we have our collaborative meetings is, do we have consensus? Because if we don't, that's not a bad thing. Like I said, it took us 10 years to move the code cycle last time. But it doesn't prohibit people from saying, I would like to see it go this direction. What they're going to ask for is the justification, and the cost analysis and everything that goes with that. So I would not hold you back from doing that.
No, and maybe now that this legislative session is over, does it give AIA Idaho the ability to maybe to look at this to see is this something that they would want to submit some kind of a support? And I'll try to forward this information on, I'm not currently sitting on the board. So as just a committee member, I'll kind of relay this information and see if they would be willing to take that position. The chair is also an AIA member, and I believe that that's the reason why he's in that position as chair is it limits the vote. My point is as just like it took 10 years to get to where we're at, it's going to take another 10 years to go to the next cycle, but we got to start somewhere. And if it's kept simple, like this is the 2024 code as it's written, is that the best way to approach it?
It's definitely not simple. The 21 and the 24 are quite a departure from the norm. And yeah, it's not simple. So just to, again, there is support for moving the 2024 commercial. I think there's some merit to try and do that. I would obviously I'd like to see them all in the same cycle, but it wouldn't be the first time that they weren't.
So is a strategy to push for the commercial aspect and then try to tag along at a later date. Hey, we're at the 2024 commercial. Why are we not there with the residential?
Exactly.
That's your thoughts.
Yes.
On that, I do know that we're going a little bit past time, and I know some folks have already had to leave for meetings.
Thank you.
Keep talking. Appreciate y'all being here. Real quick, before I forget, Damon, if you could send me your presentation, so I can send that information out, if that's okay with you, in our follow-up email, which will hopefully be later today. Otherwise, like I said, didn't want to interrupt too bad, but I do know we're going a little bit past time, and some folks have meetings, so I just wanted everyone to be aware of that. Last point before continuing discussion, I believe we are going to meet next month to follow up. As far as I'm aware, I'll double check that with Tess. But do plan for next month, last Thursday, same time. You'll get an invite, all that good stuff.
So we're not going to this document that I presented today. I will send the individual components, but the air seal checklist that IDL and I are working on. That's just to show you what the formatting would look like. We don't want to send that out and then have people
Nitpick.
comment because it's not done. It's not even a rough.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. If anyone else has any more discussion, feel free. Just wanted to acknowledge that we're running a little over time.
I would suggest just maybe we could get better direction if at the board we just recommend that we adopt the IECC and have the options being whether we're going to adopt it as is or whether we're going to strike sections or scale back sections. And especially if the residential is the one where you're least likely to get support for or the most consternation, that's where you'd say, well, what if we strike the R408? But maybe you keep the C406 in the commercial one, or I'm just trying to give them options more about so we can align closer to the model codes, and the options are more about what do we need to cut out to get them to support moving to the model codes.
So again, we're not presenting to the board. We're trying to get past the first step, and we've already been told repeatedly that the 21 and the 24 as written are no-goes.
Yeah, well, I mean, the suggestion is more about like what, not about, okay, as written being no-goes, but like, what do we need to change to make it garner support?
That's what I'm asking you guys.
Yep.
I have my opinion of what I'm trying to do. You know, we are running out of time.
All right, if that's it, unless there's any last minute questions or comments, thank you all very much for being here. Thanks for bearing with us a little bit over time. We appreciate it. Again, Damon, just send me that. Otherwise, I'm only saying it because otherwise I will forget. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day, and have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.